After 16 years of silence, my ex-wife, the woman who blew up my life and then ran off overseas Australia, randomly showed up crying on my porch, left a mysterious envelope, and got arrested by the cops that very same night. I was home at 3 o'clock this afternoon, which almost never happens. Normally, on a weekday, I don't walk through the front door until at least 6 o'clock, sometimes later if traffic decides to hate me. So just the fact that I was home early already felt strange, like I had stepped into some alternate version of my day. I was upstairs, half distracted with some mindless scrolling on my phone, when I heard a knock at the front door. Not the kind of tentative knock you get from delivery people who just want to drop a package and vanish, but a sharp, deliberate knock. A second later, the doorbell rang. The sound echoed up the staircase, sharp and intrusive in the quiet of the house. I frowned and moved toward the upstairs window that overlooked the driveway. That's when I noticed it, an unfamiliar car, idling in my driveway. I couldn't see the driver, just the vague shape of someone sitting behind the wheel. My heart gave a weird little jump, something between annoyance and suspicion. Then I looked at the porch. Standing there was a woman with light-colored hair, turned slightly away from the door, glancing back at the car she'd apparently arrived in. From that angle, I couldn't see her face clearly, but everything about it felt off. Not a solicitor, I thought. Not the typical clean-cut Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormon missionaries in their matching ties, either. I told myself it could be anything, someone lost, maybe, or a neighbor I didn't know well. So I went downstairs, each creak of the steps amplifying the silence of the house. By the time I reached the front door, I was almost bracing myself, trying to figure out whether I should even open it. I pulled the main door back, and my hand landed on the storm door handle. That's when the woman turned around. And in that instant, the world just stopped. I knew her. I knew her the way you know a scar on your own skin, the way you know a voice that once lived inside your head. Amy, my ex-wife. For the sake of politeness, I could have called her something else here. But no, her name is Amy, and if she happens to read this, I don't care. I froze with my hand gripping the handle. My entire body went rigid, torn between two conflicting impulses: throw the door open and demand what the hell she was doing on my porch, or hold it tightly shut, barricade myself against her presence, like she might poison the air in my house if I let her in. When she turned, she was smiling, almost sheepish, almost hopeful. But the second her eyes landed on me and she saw my expression, everything about her collapsed. My face must have been a mirror of every ounce of disgust, shock, and loathing I felt clawing through me, because her smile shattered instantly. Her mouth trembled, her eyes filled, and she began to cry right there on my porch, as though she hadn't rehearsed this moment, as though she thought it would go any differently. We both stood like that for what felt like forever, though it couldn't have been more than 15 seconds. Me on one side of the glass, frozen, glaring. Her on the other, unraveling into tears. I kept thinking, this isn't real, this isn't real. Any second I'd wake up and laugh bitterly about how my subconscious still liked to torture me. But then reality landed with a heavy thud. It was real. The woman in front of me wasn't a stranger, wasn't a hallucination. It was her. One of the only two human beings in this world I can say, with complete honesty, that I truly despise. And she was standing right there on my front porch, crying like she had a right to be here. I pulled my phone from my pocket with hands that were trembling so hard I almost dropped it. Muscle memory kicked in, and I hit record. I wasn't worried about visuals. Hell, I couldn't even get my camera pointed straight if I tried, but I wanted audio. I wanted proof. I didn't trust myself not to black out in rage or panic. I pointed a finger at her through the glass, my voice sharp and loud. Back away from the door.
Now.
She flinched, turned slowly, and stepped down off the stoop. 2 steps, no more, before she stopped dead on the walkway. Her eyes were wide, wet, her lips twitching like she wanted to explain herself, but couldn't. I yanked the door open and stepped outside, even though my gut screamed to stay inside and lock it tight. Every nerve in me was firing like a live wire. My chest ached with adrenaline, and I honestly wasn't sure if I was about to lunge at her or collapse. "What the hell are you doing here?" I spat. The words tumbled out hot, sharp, dripping with venom. I added more profanity than was necessary, but I wanted to wound. I wanted every word to remind her she wasn't welcome here, not now, not ever. She tried to speak, but her voice came out broken and trembling. That's when I noticed her face, off, wrong somehow. It looked like she'd had Botox injected on one side, frozen and sagging at the same time. The words slurred out of her mouth, barely intelligible, like her tongue wasn't working right. I only caught every third word, and even those didn't connect. Something in me twisted, disgust, rage, maybe even pity. But the last thing I was going to do was let her unload whatever mess she'd brought to my doorstep. You know what? I cut her off, hand slicing through the air. I don't give a shit why you're here. I don't care what you want. I'm calling the police. Get the fuck off my property. I turned my back and stormed inside, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the glass in its frame. My thumb jabbed at the keypad of my phone, dialing 911 before my brain even processed it. When the dispatcher answered, my voice came out calmer than I felt. I need an officer at my address to remove someone from my property. I gave the details quick and blunt. No story, no excuses, just the demand. I hung up before she could ask too many questions. From the window, I watched Amy slowly make her way back toward the car parked in my driveway. Her walk was strange, not quite a limp, but uneven, awkward, like her body wasn't entirely cooperating. She slid into the passenger seat, and I let out a breath, thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd back out and drive away before this turned into a circus. But they didn't. The car just sat there, idling, headlights burning holes into my driveway. I could see shadows shifting inside, the driver leaning toward her, maybe consoling, maybe arguing. Maybe they thought waiting me out would work. Maybe they wanted the cops to arrive too. My jaw clenched.
Fine.
Let them wait. Within minutes, the familiar flash of red and blue cut through the gray afternoon. A squad car rolled in slow, blocking the end of my driveway so the other vehicle couldn't leave even if it wanted to. My heart rate spiked. This was happening. This was real. 2 officers stepped out. One made his way to the car with Amy inside. The other came toward me. I stood at the doorway, phone still recording in my hand, chest heaving like I'd run a marathon. Sir, the cop asked, his voice steady but cautious. My ex-wife is in that car, I said immediately, pointing so hard my arm shook. I want her removed. And I want a restraining order to keep her away from me. The officer raised both hands in a calming gesture, like he was trying to slow me down before I blew a fuse. All right, let's take this one step at a time. I can walk you through the process for a restraining order, but just so you know, that's something only a judge can grant. Not us. I don't care who grants it, I snapped, my voice cracking with pent-up fury. I just want her gone. She has no right to be here. I don't want her anywhere near me. Ever. The cop studied me for a beat, eyes flicking from my shaking hands to the phone I was clutching like a weapon. He softened his voice. How long has it been since you've seen or spoken to her? That question stopped me cold. My mind scrambled through years of silence. I knew the answer instantly, but saying it out loud hit me harder than I expected. Over a decade, I muttered. Then louder, sharper. January would have been 20 years since I made the biggest mistake of my life. We were married for a handful of years before she cheated.
Lied.
Ripped everything apart. We even lied about our separation just to fast-track the divorce. Since then, nothing. No calls. No texts. No sightings. Until today. And now she shows up here on my porch, like it's nothing. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. My grip on the doorframe tightened so hard my knuckles turned white. My head swam with questions I didn't want to ask. Why now? Why me? What the hell did she want after all this time? 16 years. That's how long it had been since I'd seen or heard from Amy. 16 years of silence, of rebuilding, of trying to patch together the ruins she left behind after detonating my life like it was nothing but dry kindling. She'd moved to Australia, married some other poor bastard, and for all I knew she was on the other side of the planet sipping wine by the ocean, smiling like she hadn't obliterated me. That was fine by me. I wanted her as far away from my orbit as humanly possible. And then one day, out of nowhere, she messaged me on Facebook. Like time hadn't passed. Like she could just casually stroll back into my life and say, hey, water under the bridge, right? She actually suggested we could let bygones be bygones and maybe form some kind of friendship. A friendship. I don't know what delusional universe she was living in, but it wasn't mine. In my universe, Amy was radioactive. In my universe, she was the embodiment of betrayal, the black hole that had swallowed years of my life whole. So I did what any sane man would do. I wrote her back with a response that scorched the earth between us so thoroughly there wouldn't be so much as a weed left standing. I told her in explicit detail how much I despised her, how she was the single biggest mistake of my life. I wished every horrible thing I could put into words on her and everyone she loved. I told her hell ought to reserve a special wing just for her, extra crispy, with her name on the door, and that I hoped she got there sooner rather than later. Then I told her to never, never contact me or anyone in my family ever again. I called her demonically evil. I told her that the absolute worst day of my entire existence was the day I met her, because it led to years of misery, lies, humiliation, and destruction of everything I'd worked for. When I hit send, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. And then, as the cherry on top, I deleted my Facebook account. If there was one good thing to come out of the whole situation, it was that. A silver lining, sure, but I felt like I'd finally slammed the door shut and welded it closed. That was the last time I ever communicated with her in any way, shape, or form, until she showed up on my porch. When the cops arrived that day, she told them she just wanted to talk. That's what she said, trembling lips, slurred speech, crocodile tears. Just wanted to talk. And the officers told her flat out, "No, he doesn't want to talk, it's clear." She scribbled down a number and an email, handed it to them, and begged them to pass it along to me. They did, but I never even touched the paper. Then the cops told her to leave and not come back. They made it clear, if she was seen on my property again within 48 hours, she'd be arrested for stalking, trespassing, maybe worse. I thought that was the end of it. But no. Hours later, my ring cam pinged. Motion detected. And there she was, creeping up onto my steps in the dead of night, dropping a large envelope onto my porch like some twisted Santa Claus. I didn't even open the door. Didn't shout. Didn't touch the envelope. I just saved the footage, called the cops again, and waited. They were the ones who opened the letter. I didn't want to know what was in it. Apologies, excuses, manipulations, whatever garbage she'd scrawled on paper. None of it mattered. To me, that envelope was radioactive, and I wasn't about to contaminate myself by opening it. The cops took it as evidence. And within hours, Amy was arrested at the hotel she'd been staying at. Hauled out of whatever rented room she thought would be her staging ground for this deranged little campaign. I don't know if she has money for bail, and honestly, I don't care. She made her choices. And yes, I will absolutely be pressing charges. I've also formally requested a restraining order. Here's the thing. My family? They're all gone. My parents, my siblings, every one of them. The house I live in now is the house I grew up in, the one my mom left me when she passed 6 years ago. It's mine, my sanctuary, and for Amy to come back here like this felt like a desecration. For all I know, maybe she thought my mom would answer the door. Maybe she thought she could weasel her way back into some version of the life she torched. The only person left from my before Amy life is a single friend, one guy who stuck with me through it all. He remembers. He knows what she did, the lies, the betrayal, the destruction she left behind. Even he was shocked when I told him she'd shown up after all these years. But then he said something that pissed me off. He told me maybe I overreacted. That maybe I should have just talked to her. Maybe I should have opened the letter, read it, heard her out. That getting her arrested after 16 years was, in his words, kind of an asshole move. And I just stared at him, dumbfounded. Because here's the thing, 16 years ago, Amy destroyed my life and then rode off into the sunset like nothing happened. So, if someone wants to call this revenge, fine. I'm good with that. I told my buddy flat out. The last time we spoke, I told her I never wanted to see her again. I told her I'd never forgive her. I told her she was dead to me. And now, after 16 years, she decides to roll up like nothing happened? No. She doesn't get to rewrite history on her terms. She doesn't get to decide when the curtain rises again. She had her chance and she burned it. If she's sitting in a jail cell right now regretting her decisions, good. That's the closest thing to justice I'll ever get. And honestly, I don't care why she came back. I don't care if it was to apologize, to confess, to leave me $1 million check, to tell me she had 6 months to live. I don't care. So, yeah, my buddy thinks I'm the a-hole for having her arrested. But I don't. Not for 1 second. Because sometimes you can't undo the damage someone's done. Sometimes there's no forgiveness.